نحمد ونصلي على رسول الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from the Business Matters program. Yes, Business Matters back on air after a fairly lengthy break for various reasons. Been a very exhausting week for me personally, something I'll touch on just now. And as you would have gathered, my guest in the studio today is a very, very busy person. He was introduced just now on the previous program. Literally walked out of council meetings to be here in the studio with me, and I really do appreciate that. And with that, it's Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to Imtiaz Said. Imtiaz Said from the Active Citizens Coalition and eThekwini Secure, and a person who needs really no introduction to Radio Al Ansar. Imtiaz, welcome to Radio Al Ansar once again.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having us, Anwar.
Very snazzily dressed, I must say, today. Sports coat and very formal, but I suppose that's what council calls of you. Just before we get into the formalities, the number in the studio 0861904904 and the WhatsApp number 0609041056. So if anybody has got any questions that they want to throw at Imtiaz Said, that's the numbers to be dialing in or WhatsApping on, and I'll be happy to forward your questions to him. Tonight we're going to be focusing on the impact to basic operations and the economy of the KZN floods that we're all very, very familiar with, something that's affected us twice in a very short period of time. And I've got Imtiaz here, and he's going to fill us in. But before I get into that, I must say my first interaction with Imtiaz, and I'm trying to look back, is when COVID first started. As part of Islamic guidance, I visited you at your home, which was also part of your studio, and we discussed together how we're going to have an impact in terms of distributing food as well as hampers and things to various communities. And I must say I was very impressed speaking to you at the time about how hands-on you were, how on the ground you were, and how your team rallied around you and the amount of work you got done. And we at Islamic Guidance then partnered with you, and we did some good work on the ground at the time. So when I did hear about you actually forming a political party called the Active Citizens Coalition, I was actually very pleased to hear that, because I knew, based on your history and your record, that you would be making a difference for all of us. Yeah. And I'm pleased to say I think you have, and continue to do so. So long may that continue, inshallah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you with good health and give you the strength and ability to carry on the good work that you're doing. But I would be failing if I didn't ask you, Imtiaz, the reason you went from being more a kind of an activist, if I can call it that, on the ground, more involved in humanitarian work, to actually forming a political party.
No, absolutely. You see, when we conceptualize things, and if you try and have some foresight and understand the trajectory of things to come, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You'd realize what we would need in a few years' time, right? So when we started out in the space of activism, and we didn't really start out in eThekwini Secure. eThekwini Secure was a branch of the CPF platforms when we were having challenges with forming neighborhood watches. So we started out in the CPF platforms, and when we had challenges with SAPS saying you can't form a neighborhood watch and all of that, we formed eThekwini Secure to say you have a right to mobilize your community in safety and all of those things, right? We then further moved on to eThekwini Outreach. We spoke to social cohesion and social development and all of those things. But we mainly focused on disaster relief. We didn't go every day and say we're doing something every day. Whenever there was a disaster, let's go into disaster management. So it's a fire and things like that, we'll get involved. COVID, flooding, all of that, we'll get involved. Because the main thing about eThekwini Secure was we had human capital. We had people. And that's a very important tool to have. So we formed eThekwini Outreach as a sister organization or brother organization of eThekwini Secure. We then moved on into a point of view to say that we needed to get some good minds together from different areas, and we formed something called Abantu Bashlangani Against Crime. And that was sort of a think tank with many leaders, and some of them are deceased now, and they were great leaders. They've given us a lot of advice, and we put that together to say, how do we work in different areas on the commonalities of what we require? And when we looked at it in the perspective we saw it, we didn't get into politics then, because the climate of crime superseded that of service delivery. I'm talking about 2014. In 2014, you were not worried about potholes and water and all of those things.
Yeah.
You were worried about crime, which affected you. So we concentrated on that, and I think we've come up with sort of a good understanding and plan and mobilization strategy around that. Thereafter, we decided, you know what, the next thing that's coming to the fore is service delivery, and it's here now, if you know what I mean. But when we started out the climb into it, it wasn't as bad as we see it now. So we started going to ratepayers meetings, having an understanding. We then formed the eThekwini Joint Ratepayers Association, right? Then we understood that we needed to form the South African Business Forum as well, right? And I'll give you an understanding of why those things are formed. But ultimately, in all of the activism we had, every single organization or every cap that we wore and whatever. So everyone asked me, but you're doing so many things. I said, you see, that's the issue with society. When they're doing one thing, they want to judge you by the capacity of themselves. Now, if you've got many people and you've got many hands to assist you, you can do many things. So we've got different individuals working on different things, doing different things in different spaces. But when we took all of these organizations, we always found ourselves with our hands out begging to political will.
Sure, yeah.
And that was a problem. So we kept on knocking on councillors' doors and mayors' doors and deputy mayors' doors, and no one could help us. Officials were just ignoring, no matter how active you were in your community, you were just being ignored, right? So even though we made inroads into those spaces, it was always a favor being done to us. And we then took a decision. We're now going to break down that wall and sit in those chairs to bring change. And that's the reason. It's to assist everything we've done. We know that we need political will. So ACC is the political aspect of what we do. And now we've got a full view of everything, starting from the ground with CPFs, taking care of crime, making sure ratepayers are activated, making sure businesses are organized, and then having politicians in sort of our corner to listen to what we have to say, to push that agenda in councils for us. And therefore, we didn't run nationally. We only ran in eThekwini. Because what we understood at the time was that there's three spheres of government. You've got national, provincial, and local. And we must be realistic. People get service delivery at local government at no other level.
Right.
Other levels, they're discussing bigger issues about building a hospital and building roads and doing all of that. But your real trade services, your water, your sanitation, the things you need as a consumer every day is delivered at local government. And if we can't get local government right, why go to parliament? For what? Let's get this right first. So we're saying that we started out this party, we know what we want. For us, it's not about getting a salary or doing all of those things. It's about understanding the climate and seeing where we can put ourselves in. And I'll tell you now, I sit as part of Human Settlements and Infrastructure Committee, which spends 75% of our budget goes through that committee. That's your trade services. Everything that you need except your parks and gardens and libraries comes out of Human Settlements and Infrastructure Committee. So it's a very important thing for us to understand how government works. And if we didn't start mobilizing ourselves in society, we would find ourselves wanting in the next election, we would have found ourselves wanting.
So it's a question of, rather than being a puppy on the outside barking and barking and barking and not getting anybody to listen to you,
Correct.
or just threatening with your barking, rather be on the inside, be the dog on the inside and get really active and be at the cold face of things, as you would call it.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, the name Active Citizens Coalition, where would
So
that...
it came to us naturally because active citizenry is what we've always stood for, So being an active citizen entails every single individual, no matter what you're doing. Even if it means you have a lobby group to say we're taking care of monkeys or we're taking care of birds or whatever, that's an active citizen. It's something that's important to you. It's something that you want to do. And active citizenry is the call of the day today. Everyone needs to be involved.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question now, but I don't want you to answer now. I want you to answer at the end of the program.
Okay.
And that question is are you going to be participating at the provincial and national level for the next election? But I don't want you to answer that now. But I promise you, I'm sure I'm going to get a very good answer out of you before the end of the program. But let's move on to the issue at hand at the moment. Mm-hmm. And we all know what has happened over the last few weeks. And unfortunately, as somebody said to me the other day, we got some big jadoo put on us in KZN. We need to go and cut some black cows or black fowls or something. Yeah. So that's a reality. I mean, we started with the rioting last year, and then we kind of slightly recovered from that, and then it was it was the floods and then the second lot of floods, and it's been one thing after the other. So we know, I mean, I talk for myself. I come from the Westville area. I stay there. It's been an absolute challenge. We still, up to today, many weeks later, we've got certain roads that don't have water on a daily basis. They get cut off at 7 o'clock in the evening and put back on at 4 in the morning. The councillor, I must say, is very unhelpful, and really they've been. I must take my hat out to a lady called Annie, or Anissa, and better known as Annie, and certain other people that she works with. If it was not for their efforts, I promise you, we still wouldn't have had water.
Absolutely.
Councillor in the area, full of excuses.
Yes.
Excuse me saying that, but I'm happy to say it on air. Now, you, I know, have been very active. We've had a situation in very close to our studios here. We're in the Musgrave area, stroke Morningside area. They've been without water for the last day and a half or whatever. I know people have been scrambling around. But I suppose money is one problem. Tongaat is sitting without water, I think, still till today. There's issues all over. I mean, when you drive around the city, even up to today, you see piles of sand and dust. It's been a challenge, and nature can be blamed for all of it, but certainly neglect in terms of our infrastructure can also be blamed to an extent.
Absolutely.
So I don't know where to even start from, but I'm sure these things are being discussed at council very, very actively, and that would be priority at the moment.
No, absolutely. So in terms of council in itself, right, there were two components. One is flood relief. Right, flood relief to people that are affected in their homes and whatever.
Sure.
And the reliance on NPOs and NGOs became the norm of the day. So the likes of Al-Ansar Outreach, CSN, NMJ and Human Aid and Itikweni Outreach and all that became the norm for the city to reach out to say, we need assistance, we need blankets, we need mattresses, all of those things. That was one aspect. When it comes down to the issue of infrastructure, it comes down to SCM processes.
Right.
And as soon as you go into SCM processes, it gets long drawn out because now you have to have proposals and budgets and all of those things. And this is why council is actually sitting. If you go onto Itikweni's website right now, I left that meeting. So Mohammed Ismail is still there, but they're currently discussing the issues of budget. And we've actually moved for it to come back again because we're not passing the budget at the moment.
Okay.
Because there needs to be some sort of clear understanding of what we're doing in certain aspects of the budget. Now, flood relief, according to my understanding of today's meeting, and I stand to be corrected, we require something like 77 million rand now for immediate damage.
77 million to me sounds like a small figure.
I'm talking about today.
Today, as in right immediately.
Yes, because there's work that's carrying on and we don't have money for it.
Okay.
So that's what it means. It doesn't mean in the long term that's all we need. We're going to require billions of rands.
Yeah.
But right now we don't have that money to pay for what we're currently engaging in. Okay. And that's a cause for concern. Now the other challenge we face in terms of service delivery is that communities are not organized in solidarity. And that is something that's very important. Because you have many organizations within communities that say, no, I know the deputy mayor and I know the mayor and I know this one. No, that's not how we should be approaching this. Communities now need to solidify their action. And we're doing this in Chatsworth. Tomorrow evening, I've got a major meeting in Chatsworth. And I'm calling all leaders. I mean, leaders have their own egos and they carry on about things and I've done this and you've done that. No, let's leave all of that aside.
Okay.
I want to get everyone into one room. Clearly identify for me the 5 priorities you need right now, and we'll put in some direction in terms of how do we achieve those goals. Once we're done with that 5, let's continue in terms of achieving things. And hopefully by then, we should get things together. I don't know whether you've seen, for the first time in my life, I've seen a community in Tongaat protesting yesterday. Where have you seen that? Right. So the new normal is going to be exactly what we've seen yesterday. And it's not going to end there, because Tongaat's not going to get water for the next 6 months.
Wow.
And that is projected on paper. Right. Realistically is another story, if you understand what I'm saying.
That doesn't sound good.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But that's the reality of the climate. Now, we can stand and we can protest as much as we want.
Right.
If the funds are not there, if we're not putting pressure on provincial government, if we're not putting pressure on national government, I mean, we're asking. The president has declared Itikweni a disaster zone.
Sure. Yeah.
And they've promised R1 billion. They're not giving it to us.
Okay.
They're saying provincial government needs to hold that purse and start sorting things out, and they want to have oversight. And by the time they discuss all of these things, we've been almost 60 days into the flood. It's been 2 months.
Right.
What are we doing here? So immediate responses need to happen. However, the bureaucracy within the city and in government doesn't allow us to do things at a speedy space or a speedy time frame, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So those are the challenges they face as a city, which I can understand from their perspective. However, being said, when communities are not organized and in solidarity and they don't have their asks in line and they don't know who to speak to, then they speak to themselves.
Okay.
You know? So those are the things that are currently happening.
Okay, so I mean, you've and I appreciate your fact that you've literally rushed out of a council meeting that's, as you've well said, is still ongoing,
True.
and you've come into the studios to be with us. But we have, starting at the very basic level, there's people that had what they call shacks or jondals or whatever on the banks of the rivers, and those rivers, those little streams became raging torrents.
Absolutely.
And those houses got washed away.
Yes.
Now you got people sitting there with no clothes, with no roof over their head. They don't know where the next meal is going to come from. That was priority. And alhamdulillah, the community organizations, and let's get away with our Muslim organizations
Absolutely.
are at the absolute forefront whenever they need it.
Absolutely.
And they're being stretched to the limits as well, because you're reaching out to the same base of donors all the time.
Yes.
So those organizations are being stretched, but they're doing their utmost, and I'm sure you part of that as well, to help wherever they can.
Yes.
We then have the bigger issue is that people, there's roads that have been washed away. Potholes is now part of our lives, really.
Yeah.
But I suppose potholes is not a priority when you got a problem where people don't have water and electricity at their homes. Now let's take the example of Tongato, that area, right? You probably know better than most what really happened there. Was the whole infrastructure got washed away, or
Correct. So the entire plant that actually pumps water. I mean, let's go back in history a little bit. Pre-floods,
Right.
the areas like Verulam and Terence Park and all of that always had a water issue. We got to go there first.
Okay.
Right? So there's always been a problem. Now, when we stretch our infrastructure to the extent that it doesn't have capacity, we then find ourselves in these sorts of situations when one particular piece of equipment, and I'm putting that lightly.
Right.
When I say a piece of equipment, I mean it's an entire waterworks.
Right. Okay.
Right? That has now been washed away.
Okay.
In order to put that back in place, the time frames given by the city, provided funding is available, is 6 months, and this was 2 months ago.
Okay. And nothing
And we
is
still don't have the funding.
Okay.
So how do we move forward from there? Now there's talks of bringing in pipelines from different areas that have water so that they can get an interim supply, even though the pressure would be lower, and all of those things are still being discussed. There's issues of reverse osmosis tanks, which is really ultimately a trial and error kind of thing. There's organizations putting up boreholes in the masajids in the areas, but that's not potable drinking water. I mean, you can use it for your toilets and all of that. So the normality that we've known in majority of the areas is no longer going to be the same. We're going to go back to, and I've made a suggestion originally in the Spingo area, that waiting for water tankers is not happening. I mean, our organizations were giving out water in 5 liters, which was drinkable, right? So they'd go to a particular house which has been flooded, and they'd say, we're giving you 5 liters only to drink. But the lady is saying, I need to clean my house.
Yeah.
What do I do? So we made a recommendation that it's either organizations or the city themselves place down JoJo tanks on pallets in all of these streets, probably 200 meters apart, and have the tankers work 24 hours to just top up the JoJo tanks. Because if an area has been identified as a high risk area, meaning it's not going to get water for at least the next 2 months,
Right.
why would we then have a water tanker waiting 4 hours to service a community when he can just go with his big yellow line and top up and run away?
Right.
And people can have water for the next 24 hours until he comes back. So it became now the new normal of us doing that. And currently, I mean, we currently facing water shedding at the moment. So you'll find that every evening at a certain time they're going to be shutting down the water, and then in the morning it's going to be put back. And one thing we need to be very, very mindful of is that on Sundays generally you're not going to have water. Why? Because our reservoirs are filling up at a very slow pace because there are 2 aqueducts that are down.
Okay.
Now, if those aqueducts are down, they need to go to Amgeni Heights and Wiggins in order to make it potable, firstly. And the supply to our reservoirs, which are all over Curry Road and all over the place, now need to start topping themselves up. And when you start looking at the capacity by which the reservoirs are getting filled up, it's not enough to provide for the communities, especially on the weekends. Now, in the week, you wouldn't really have a major issue. You'd have water shedding, like late at night, 9 o'clock, and then maybe at 4 in the morning in different areas or whatever. And the reason for that is to allow for the reservoirs to fill up overnight so that by the morning you should have water to shower and go to work. Now, what we find is on the weekend, Friday night, everyone's at home. You're not at work because you're at work in the day. So you're having a shower and you're going to work. Majority of the of the community, right? So there's time in the day for those reservoirs to continue. However, on a Friday night, everyone's at home.
Right.
So you're using water on a Friday, using water on a Saturday, and on a Sunday you don't have no water.
Okay, so consumption is higher over the weekends.
So therefore, we need to be mindful of how we use water.
Okay, we're going to have to break for the 9 o'clock news and then continue with this very interesting discussion. But I'm just going to leave with a question that we can tackle after this. And
Yes.
it's an interesting observation. I was in Zimbabwe a few years ago, and a friend of ours, his name is Hassan Badela, very, very big family in Zimbabwe, come from Motare. And he had invited me and a few friends over to go fishing on the Kariba Dam. So we spent 4 days on a beautiful houseboat fishing on the Kariba Dam. Really, really nice experience. But at the time, and this was when we just started with our electricity load shedding, literally at the very beginning, going back a couple of years. And he said to us at the time, and we laughed at him, and he said, watch from our experience. You guys are starting to have electricity shortages now. And he said, yeah, okay. He said, we already had it. We've been through this. So he says, you know what? Brace yourself for the future. And we said, what is the future? He said, from the electricity shortage, you're going to get potholes, he told us. And we laughed at him. And then he said, brace yourself for water shortages. Yes. And we said, come on, Assam, you're being a bit ridiculous now. Yeah. He said, I'm telling you guys, we've been through it. And he said, there's one step after that. And he says, we said, what's that? He said, then brace yourself for your currency just crashing. Right? And he said, we've been through it. Hyperinflation, inflation running at 60 to 80%. Yeah. And I'm not proud to say it, but his prophecy has come very true. We're going exactly the same way as 100%. Zimbabwe.
Best practice dictates. I mean, if you look at the entire Africa, and if you look at the trajectory of any country, you go from Malawi, you come down to Zambia, you go into Mozambique, you go all of these countries. And if you look at the trajectory of the events and you compare it to us, it'll tell you a pattern of direction where we're going.
So I'm going to leave it at that. We're going for the news, and when we come back, we're going to continue this discussion. And I hope to take this in a positive way, so that give us some hope rather than tell us what's wrong. But anyway, we'll follow this up. So let's break for the 9 o'clock news.
Business Matters.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and welcome back to the Business Matters program on Radio Al Ansar. Radio Al Ansar, the numbers in the studio is 0861 904 904 and the WhatsApp number 060 904 1056. You with me, Anwar Mullah, and this program is brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Business. If you were with us before the news break, you would know that my esteemed guest in the studio tonight is Councillor Imtiaz Said. And we've been talking about the issues at hand, which is the flooding, the service delivery issues, etc., that have been taking place and which is at the forefront of everybody's minds at the moment. Imtiaz, I know, has been hard at work, whether he's in meetings, coming out of meeting people, on the ground, getting things done, but certainly him and his team have played a very important role in exactly what's been happening. And that's why we got him here this evening, to tell us exactly where we stand, because people are getting frustrated, and the frustration seems to be boiling over a little bit now. So, Imtiaz, I'm saying as a first point of protest for the fact that there's really very little or a lack of service delivery, as a ratepayer, I'm having to pay every month. I'm paying rates on my houses, I'm paying rates on my business, I'm being taxed directly, indirectly, national level, local level, all of it. How do I voice a protest? Because, I mean, can I hold back from paying my rates as a mark of protest against the fact that I'm entitled to certain services which I'm not getting?
What's your evidence in it? Where do you get that evidence?
The evidence of what? The fact that there's no service delivery. I mean, that's glaring. I mean, ask half of Morningside to turn their taps on at the moment, and there's no water flowing.
Absolutely. So that's disaster management related, right? However, to answer your question, and the reason I ask, is that if you don't have enough evidence to say that I'm paying someone for something and they are not delivering what they promised me,
Yes.
right? What is it that they promised you? They promised you services in terms of what? Getting you water. Now, what we need to remember is that, and I'm going to go into this so people can understand. I might just go a little bit slowly, right?
Right.
Because it's quite technical. There's two types of expenditure in the city. There's a capex and there's a opex. Your capital expenditure for the bigger things and your operational expenditure for everything that we need daily. So this is your water infrastructure, your electricity infrastructure, all of those things. That's your operational everyday running of the city, parks department, all of that comes out of your OPEX, right? 73% of the operational expenditure comes directly from your rates.
Okay. 73% of operational expenditure.
Right?
Okay.
That's one part. Now, let me go into something called a consolidated bill. It's a white paper everyone that pays rate gets.
Gets it, yeah.
Right? On it, it says rates at the top. 73% of that is used for the operation of the city. Meaning, Metro Police, your lifesavers, your beaches, all of these things. It comes from that. That's what it's there for. The question I'm raising, and we all need to raise as ratepayers, is how much of that money is actually supposed to be spent on the street it is derived. Obviously, 100% of it can't.
Can't be, sure.
Right? Because we've got a city to run. I mean,
Right.
City Hall needs to exist. Councillors need to get paid, like myself.
Yeah.
All of that needs to happen. Officials need to be getting paid. There's diesel costs on the vehicles. But we're asking a simple question to the city. And we all should be, I can't ask it because I'm a councillor, but ratepayers need to ask it. And they need to be mobilized in asking it. How much of our rates is supposed to be spent directly on our street? And if the city comes back and says it's 10%,
Okay.
now hold them accountable to that 10%.
Right.
Hold them accountable to that 10% to say, you told us in my street we spend, we paying the city R1 million a month per se, and 10% is 100,000 rand.
Sure.
If now it's quantified, it's not just, oh, you're not delivering service. What service am I not delivering? Because they said 10%. So 100,000 rand must be spent on your street. Or if it's kept for an entire year, it should be 1.2 million rand. And if they come and do a major road revamp and it costs 1.2 million rand, then so
Great.
be it.
Absolutely.
It's fine.
Yeah.
But that is how you hold the city accountable. That is how you hold anyone accountable. I mean, you got a contractor that comes to your home and says, I'm fixing your roof and I want R1 million.
Right.
You don't give him the money until the roof's done.
Sure.
And if you didn't do the roof, you don't give him the money. It's that simple. So let us be very clear in what we're saying. Can you just go into a rates boycott? No, you can't. Create your evidence. Have an understanding. And through the trajectory of that understanding and the asks that you're asking in a mobilized society, you'd automatically see accountability, transparency, and change. Because now you understand, if you know what I mean. So when you're asking and they've said, you're telling the city, you told us you're going to spend 100,000 rand, you haven't. So now they know that you mobilized, you organized, and you know what you're saying. So that's the one part. But let me go into the other part. Who represents businesses? Because this is business matters.
Okay. Yeah, the problem is we don't have an organized structure. Well, we've got the Minaira Chamber of Business, but we I suppose in terms of areas, we don't have business structures in various areas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with that being said, when you come into our industrial areas like Jacobs, like Springfield Park, like Phoenix Industrial Park, all of these industrial areas, people own those massive, and it's consortiums or it's companies or CCs that actually own these businesses.
Sure.
But are they major contributors of rates towards the city?
Absolutely, I would
Absolutely. They not build residential rates. They build business rates. And they are a major contributor towards the rates income of the city. But do you get representation? No, you don't. It's only the people that live in that area. So it could be a squatter camp. It could be a few houses that actually vote in that councillor. And that councillor has to worry about the interests of those that voted for him. So you as a ratepayer don't get any representation. So we're calling on South African businesses, and as eThekwini Secure, we formed the South African Business Forum, not to do anything except mobilize them in an understanding of why it's important for them to get together. So when they get together and they understand how much they spend as a collective, like Springfield Park. I mean, how much do you think the entire Springfield Park gives towards the city per month?
Must be quite a massive amount.
Quite a massive amount, correct? But why is it that it takes forever for those roads to be repaired? Why is there no safety and security in that area at night? Why do these businesses have to employ so many security guards and worry about all of these things when the city is getting so much of income from them? Now, who fights for that if you're not organized? Nobody. Looting affected them tremendously. Where was the city to protect them? So these are the questions we need to start asking ourselves. And now is the time for mobilization, or we're going to find ourselves wanting in the next 3 to 5 years.
But Imtiaz, we come back to that old issue of, at the moment, there's too few people funding too many. I mean, if you look at the ratepayer base, for example, it's and you look at, I mean, you probably know the statistics on the back of your hand better than I do. But there's a small grouping that's having to fund all of this, that's carrying on all the time, and it's kind of, you reach a stage when you say, hey, we can't take it any longer.
Yes.
I mean, we these expenses, and we know at the moment the cost of living is just going up exponentially, and for various reasons, blame it on Ukraine or the oil price or whatever else that's happening. But
Yes.
I mean, today we've had petrol that's going to go up at midnight tonight and going up by 2 Rand 20 some odd litre. And we know that was before even the levy was put back on.
Yes.
So they held back on the levy of 1 Rand 50 a litre, which would have taken it close to 4 Rand a litre. But that's coming. In the next 2 months, it's going to be there again. So I'm saying the cost of living is running away. Wages are not increasing the way the cost of living is going up. So the man in the street is getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And the burden is going to overtake him. Now, I know off air you alluded to the fact that we're going to reach a situation soon where we're not going to be able to afford our municipal bills.
Absolutely. You know, we have an extent of about 500 odd informal settlements in the city.
500 informal settlements.
Yes, in eThekwini, only in eThekwini.
Okay.
I mean, in Ward, I think it's Ward 23, which is the reservoirs area. In that area, you've got 19 informal settlements on its own.
Okay.
All right. So let's try and wrap our heads around this issue that we face. The city buys water from Umgeni Water monthly in extent of bulk water, potable water, that is, right? At 300 million Rand. That's the cost.
Okay.
Okay. And the city tells us quite elusively that 52% of that water is wasted.
Wasted. 52% of that water is wasted. Okay.
So when I originally went into the debate of that discussion, it said to say that then would it not be fair, and I try and give analogies. So if I have a truck of oil and I'm supposed to get 100 oil in that truck, and you are the one supposed to be delivering that oil to me, right? And along the way you dropped 52 gallons of oil.
Right.
And you delivered to me 48.
Right.
Why am I being billed for 100?
Okay. Fair question. Yeah.
Right? So the answer comes back as no, let us not be mistaken. We don't mean 52% as in it is dropped in the road or pipes leaking. There is a percentage of that. But 40 odd percent is called non-revenue water.
Okay.
Now let's understand what non-revenue water is. And not to speak against the rights of human beings. Everyone has a right to water.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Now, if 40 odd percent of the water is non-revenue water, meaning it is given away to people, and we as a city have to pay 300 million Rand towards Umgeni Water, the question then I'm raising is, where do we get the 300 million Rand from? And I will go on to say that 73% of the operational expenditure comes from the ratepayer.
Right.
So 73% of the 300 million Rand is paid by the ratepayer.
Okay.
So I'm asking the 40 odd percent of water given away as non-revenue water, who pays for it? Then I go on to say that who has mandated, or which department is mandated to take care of the informal settlements? It's human settlements, correct? So I am saying, as ACC, we are saying that the city should be raising a bill like it is a ratepayer. So if it's Jadu Place informal settlement, you've got a bulk meter at the front before the stands, you meter that, and you send a bill to the Department of Human Settlements to say, Jadu Place Informal Settlement, there's your bill. You need to pay it. You owe the city.
Right.
Why is that bill being passed on to the ratepayer?
Okay.
So those are the things we're saying. So all of these. And it's not only in the water department. It's electricity, it's the same thing.
Same thing, yeah.
435 odd informal settlements are electrified. Yes, they have prepaid meters. But many of those prepaid meters are now bypassed and electricity is being taken or stolen for free.
For free,
right?
yeah.
So we are saying as ACC that there needs to be a bulk metering system. The offset of those people that have paid in comparison to what we've metered should be billed out to the Department of Human Settlements, because at the end of the day, Anwar, it's a very simple thing. If you came to me and said, give Mr. Z 2 packets of water, right? And you didn't say anything else after that. You just gave me an instruction. I've given the water. I'm going to come to you and say, please, can you give me my money?
Give me my money for it, yeah.
So the Department of Human Settlements has instructed all of these departments to provide these services.
Right.
Who must be billed for it?
Okay.
There was no discussion with the ratepayer to say that you're going to pay for these things. They've instructed the city to provide these services. So cleansing and solid waste, they provide a service to all of these informal settlements in order to remove all their rubble and garbage. And when we went into that discussion, the presenter, and I'm not going to mention his name on air, he said that it actually, in actual fact, it should be costing every ratepayer something like 1,300 Rand to pick up their garbage every month, but they only bill us something like 300 Rand.
Okay.
So I tried to wrap my mind around. I'm saying, no, I don't understand what you're saying.
Right.
And he went on to say that the cost to company
Okay.
speaks to that. However, it's not feasible because it's an injustice to the ratepayer. So the city, from its rates portion, accommodates for the rest of it, because 73% of your operational expenditure comes from the rates. So we are being billed on DS. So you'll see your consolidated bill. It's rates, electricity, water, DSW.
That's right. Yeah.
All of these are separate line items and line departments, and we pay for the service separately. So we are asking the city in no uncertain terms, right, to say that there should be a clear definition between a paid-for service and a non-paid-for service. If you paid whichever service provider for your cell phone account on 100 minutes, you're expecting that 100 minutes.
100 minutes, yeah.
And if you don't, you should be complaining, but why are we sitting complacently and saying nothing? So we need to mobilize our communities. And we've got a clear strategy as part of the eThekwini Joint Ratepayers Association to say that Ratepayers Association should no longer be ward-based. They should be voting district-based. And everyone that's sitting at home right now listening to say, it's not my problem, I'm not going to get involved. I guarantee you, within the next 3 years, your bills are going to become unaffordable if you don't mobilize now.
Okay, because
That's the reality.
the cost of water is going to go up, the cost of
Absolutely.
electricity is going to up, and it's going to get unaffordable.
As we urbanize more, as we bring in more non-revenue bills towards the city, and if we don't resolve this issue of ensuring that the people that have been requesting for these services are actually billed for it and not us as ratepayers, we're going to find ourselves in major issues within the next few years. Your bills are going to become unaffordable, and you're not going to afford to live in your home. That's the reality.
Wow. Strong words, Imtiaz.
No, absolutely.
Okay, we got a few minutes left. On the ground, I mean, at the moment, we all are kind of wondering, when is it all going to come right? Is there some light at the end of the tunnel?
Let me be quite honest. If we don't start doing things for ourselves,
Okay.
no one's going to come and get it right for you. We need to be clear on what we ask for. I mean, you live in the Westville community, right? It's a very vibrant community. People are organized. There's great leaders there. They can get things done, right? But there are many communities that are fragmented. And if we don't unite and have a clear voice of exactly what our wants are, we're not going to get anything done. We tend to bundle up everything together. I mean, I was at a meeting the other day, and we're discussing major bridges that have collapsed, which is causing a major traffic issue where people are taking 3 hours to go to work in the morning. We're discussing a major thing like a bridge. How do we resolve a bridge issue?
Right.
And people sit there, talk to us about grass cutting. It's not the platform.
All right.
Let's not talk about the pothole on road 1113. It's not the time for it. We're talking about major issues. So we need to start prioritizing our major issues. We need to mobilize ourselves. Ultimately, everyone can sit and say, no, it's not my problem. Sit and do that right now. And best practice would dictate that we're going to find ourselves in major, major issues within the next few years. We need to get together. We need to mobilize, no matter what you do. I don't care what you do. But the fact that you're mobilizing, prioritize what you need as community and learn where to ask for it. Learn how to ask for it and learn who to get to speak to of how to get these things done. If we need to start taking care of ourselves, if we don't, we're going to have a problem.
Okay, Imtiaz, we got some major issues. As you were saying, we haven't received the money that was promised for disaster relief.
Yes.
The city is pleading poverty. I mean, in the Westville area, we had a meeting with Deputy Mayor about 3 weeks ago because they moved a whole lot of squatters into the Truro Hall, and
Correct.
people were getting all uptight about it, and rightfully so, because they were just not told; they were just brought in there.
Yes.
And the Deputy Mayor was very forthright in his saying, "Hey, you know what? Your issue is a small issue. We got much bigger issues to worry about. We got
Correct.
Toyota that's not operating there. We
Correct.
got Mondi that's got a problem. We got a whole of Tonga that doesn't have water. So."
Correct.
So don't come and I appreciate what you're saying, but your fact that you've got a few kind of people that don't have a roof over their head living in your midst is not really a big issue in the greater scheme of things.
100%.
And I appreciate what you're saying. You're saying there's bigger priorities out there, but we don't have the money. You got bridges that are down. You got the road that's going from here to the north coast that's kind of washed away.
Correct.
And it seems like there's a patching up taking place here and a patching up taking place there, but
There's no major movement.
there's no major movement, really.
There's no major movement. We don't have money for those major infrastructure repairs. The reality of it is we're going to be faced with challenges for at least the next 2 years before we even start normalizing in any scenario.
Yeah.
The reality of the informal settlements that have been washed away, currently there are plans of looking at land that can be used for this and that and whatever, but those are still in the early development stages, you know. And currently, if there are no sponsors to actually put up houses or basic accommodation for people that are living in those halls, they're going to be there for months. That's a guarantee.
Okay.
So we in for some hard times. We're only in the early days now.
All right.
Really, we're only in the early days now. Expect a lot more enthusiasm from communities to start standing up and making requests which are undeliverable, realistically undeliverable as part of the city's mandate, unless we come up very quickly and say this is where we need to speak to. But this is the problem we face as community. We tend to want to fight with the city.
Okay.
Remember, the city has a certain mandate. Their mandate is not, there was never, I mean, we had a 1 in 50 year plan for flood relief.
Okay.
1 in 50. We've had 2 floods in the period of a month or so,
All right.
right? Now, there needs to be a development plan of 1 in 500 now, based on the circumstance. Now, understand what I'm saying. Some people misconstrue the 1 in 500. We've got a plan for 1 in 500 so that we develop enough relief and an understanding of contingency budgets to take care of flooding for every 5 years. That's the reality.
Okay. Because of climate change as
Because
well.
of climate change. It plays a big part. So all of those debates have to happen and all of that needs to happen. But I can tell you right now, if the city doesn't get sponsors, international funding, and we don't pick up our economy, we're in for some real hard times ahead.
Not what I wanted to hear, but
I'm
I
sorry,
suppose
but
you're,
that's what it
you're
is.
painting a very realistic picture. So I'm going to conclude by coming back to the question I asked you earlier, is that as the Active Citizens Coalition, and we appreciate what you're doing for us, are you going to be going ahead with the fighting the national and provincial election in that's to come?
You see, for us to run in Itiqueni was a very simple task. I mean, you know, everyone tried to put us off to say it's going to cost us a lot of money.
Right.
Let me be quite frank. It cost us nothing.
Okay.
Realistically, in order to run for local government, it costs you 500 to register a party,
Right.
and you run on your own. However, the challenge we face, if I run for provincial, or if we as a party run provincially, I've got to go now to every single municipality, and run nationally, I've got to go to every single province and get a footprint. But ideally, we'd like to, as a show of interest,
Right.
not as a must-have because we want to have or want to be sitting in provincial legislature or whatever. But we do believe that it is a need. We have to do it now. And it might just be a stepping stone and a block for us now to get our foot in and have that understanding, like what we're doing in eThekwini. I mean, it's the first time we're councillors, but we've learned within the last 6 months, it's amazing the amount of knowledge we've gathered that we've never knew before.
Right.
I mean, currently, I sit on my desk. The entire city's administration, from the HODs, their cell phone numbers, their contact details, access was the most important thing for us. Now we've got that direct access. I can pick up the phone and speak to the acting municipal manager because I'm the leader of my party.
Right.
I'm not speaking to some big party that I have to speak to my caucus leader before I talk to someone.
Sure.
I can call them directly because we are a small party. We've only got 2 seats in council. I sit as part of the speakers committee, so we've got access now. And that's what our community needed.
And obviously you've built up your network.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as long as you've got that network of individuals that understand who you are, and power is a very important tool, and you got to know how to harness it. 2 seats might seem as 2 seats amongst 222,
Right.
but if you're vociferous enough and you can position yourself in a particular way where people understand you and say that this
man knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, these councillors know what they want for the community, and let's help them to get things done because that's our mandate. And there's no issues with it. Officials love working with people that are organized.
Right.
They don't have a problem with it. Just so long as we're not asking for unrealistic things,
Sure.
you know.
Sure.
So when it comes down to issues of water tankers and all of that, yes, the ward councillors are supposed to get water tankers. And water tankers currently, ward councillors that are running around with water tankers, you don't really need to do that. Because the water tanker knows what he needs to do.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? But now we find that ward councillors are politicizing tankers.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Why do you need to do that? I mean, anyone can organize a water tanker, but why would I now jump into a water tanker and go to this area? But last night, unfortunately, I got a call from a particular area that said, we are being abandoned by the councillor and they don't want to come to our area. So we had to make arrangements and get them a water tanker.
Okay.
So those are the things that are happening. Politics shouldn't be in the time of disaster. I mean, we've invited everyone, and I think Al Ansar Outreach is also a part of that flood response group that I've created, where the mayor is there, disaster management is there, Nicole Graham from the DA is there, and most parties are there. We're saying, guys, don't politicize this outreach. Tell us where your need is, and the NPOs will go assist directly. Not through your councillor, but directly. That's fine. We don't have a problem. But tell us where your need is. So in these times of disaster, we shouldn't be politicking. We should be servicing our communities in their immediate need. And that's the most important thing currently.
Excellent, Imtiaz. I think an hour well spent. I've certainly learned
Has
a
it
lot.
been an hour already?
We thank you and your party and the people that you surrounded with for the sterling work that you've done in terms of trying to get something going in terms of the service delivery. And I'm sure we'll be chatting again sometime in the future. But we wish you well, we hope things go well for the city, and that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala spares us from some of these natural
absolutely.
disasters, because I think we can't fight against nature.
No, absolutely. And I think we've got to be hopeful as well.
Right.
As much as I'm painting a very bleak picture, I think we're very resilient as a people because we've come through a lot, if you know what I mean. And I think where there's a will, there's a way, and we'll make a plan. I don't think the city will be able to let us down based on the fact that there's great diversity in the city. And there's many, I mean, you know, we've been sitting, I mean, the council meeting just finished now.
Right.
And the reason it finished now is because it's not one-sided any longer.
Okay.
There's clear opposition. And things that need to happen for the city, everyone's fighting for it. Whether it's the smallest of small parties or whether it's the biggest of parties, everyone's now fighting for the same thing. And if it's an opposing view, it has to be heard because there's a great move to say that it's no longer one-sided.
I think if we can break the back of corruption in some way,
No, absolutely.
we can get those monies channeled in the right direction rather than into people's pockets. And I think that's the crux of the matter.
Yes, you know, corruption is something that has taken our city to where it is right now.
Sure.
And I think the fact that the climate of the city has changed, automatically that fear of just rampant corruption is there.
Right.
And I think that will automatically, through suggestion, resolve itself, if you know what I mean. So there's many spotlights on many different things at the moment. And there's no longer the thing that, you know, we can just pass something in a closed room and get it done. No. Everything has to go through its now proper procedure, and also one of the downsides of that is that now you have to go through the proper SCM processes, and you have to do things properly, and there's no longer that,
And
you
there's
know,
greater
let's just
debate
make a plan.
as
There's
well.
greater debate about everything, really. There's greater debate about budgets. There's greater and realistically speaking, I mean, the budget was today. It got moved over for 7 days because many parties, including ourselves, were not happy about many things, which we caucused about and said, no, we're not passing this budget.
Right.
And it had to move. But remember, in the city at the moment, there's no ruling party. So
Okay.
they couldn't just overrun us and say, we're not really interested in whatever you do. We're just going to pass the budget. It can't happen like that anymore.
Because there's no clear majority.
There's no clear majority.
Okay.
So that's a very important tool we have on our side.
Excellent. Imtiaz, once again, thank you so much. And with that, it's we off for another week. And inshallah, I'll see you again next week, Tuesday, with another exciting guest on our Business Matters program. It's wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.